All right, 2024 has come to an end. Almost pleased about that. The last couple of weeks have been hard to take. It's interesting trying to summarize this game and review it for you. It was a strange game. I think in contrast to last week, I think against Carlton, it got ugly from about halfway through the first quarter and then just got progressively worse for the rest of the game. And so it's pretty fired up by the time the review came around. This one, the flow was a little bit different. I think if you watch the game in its entirety, it's weird to think that I'm sure that I'm not the only Eagles fan that sees that we lost by 93 points and only conceded 168 and is almost breathing a sigh of relief and almost buoyed by the second half performance. We won the second half. Almost. We'll unpack exactly what we can take from that second half later in this review. But it was crazy what happened in the first half. Now, I did go into this with no expectations. I've been a negative Nancy all week about, what to expect when we play Geelong at GMHBA. It's just routine generational trauma that seems to be going through this football club every time we play at that ground. And I know that we're a bad team in particular right now, and Geelong, well, they just qualified for the top four, but the way the game flowed was still stunning. We always expected to lose. We always expected to lose heavily, but that first half was at real world record pace. And again, to contrast it with the Carlton game, we got beaten in every facet, but there was a lot of times where we had the ball, had an opportunity, and we would just fall over for no reason, or handball it to a teammate's feet 5 meters away for no reason. So that was a different kind of frustration. In this game, it kind of just felt like we were barely on screen. Like you could be forgiven for thinking it was only Geelong out there. So it was 51-7 at quarter time, 114-14 at half time. Geelong waltzing the ball out of the centre. Although the clearance numbers weren't massively in their favour. Obviously, it doesn't speak to quality of clearances. The way the clearances are recorded, you can win the ball, handball it to an opponent, and he immediately concedes it and gets tackled holding the ball, and then Geelong go and score. That still counts as your clearance. So that's not perfect. I think generally the contest was off. I think the most alarming thing, if you had to narrow it down to one variable in this, was just with the ease with which Geelong waltzed through the centre of the ground. And that has been a routine problem for us. And this needs to be the first place we address as we look to revamp our game style next year under whoever is coach. Being able to defend from transition is the single biggest thing. It's the single biggest headache. Last year, the scores from stoppage stat was horrendous. We've gotten better at this stat, not amazingly. But defending the opposition when they're running across the ground, was just non-existent today. And that was arguably what led to such a massively inflated halftime score. I was looking at the teams, and so this was our youngest team for the year, which is interesting. So I suppose to start there, selection, I usually do a video after selection these days, but this week I decided to do it before the teams were announced. But in summary, the youngest team we've selected so far, no Gov, no Barris down back, very young and vulnerable backline, it had to be said. And, on the one hand, I suppose it's good. I think West Coast as an organisation, whether the directive's coming from Schofield or higher above him, probably higher, look at this game and say, all right, let's just give heaps of young kids a crack. That has been the trend over the last 6 weeks. And that continued, and I suppose we shouldn't complain about that. But that backline in particular, when you consider how much experience was missing in it, I was just thinking this before I recorded it. Obviously, McGovern and Barris would have made an impact today. Not a massive one, but they would have stemmed the flow a little bit, given how good they are. And Edwards and Bazzo have been really underexposed, both due to injury over the years. So that was the first headache. Witherden, dare I say it, would have been, once he played over 100 games of experience, Rotham not playing. My point being more so that not that these guys should have been playing or are better than the players that were selected, but when you consider defensive organisation, no Gov, no TB, Witherden, Rotham, like I said, and even Shannon Hearn, who did a wonderful job of sort of marshalling the troops back there. It was a very young backline. Campbell Chesser spent time there, Ryan Marrick, Harvey Johnston would have as well. I'm kind of labouring on the backline whilst acknowledging it wasn't the reason we got 100 points down, because what was ultimately the problem was that the ball was coming in so easily, and Geelong were, running through unopposed and just hitting targets willy-nilly. And that's why they were 20 goals 6 at one point. It wasn't just our bad luck that they were good in front of goal. There was some good shots at goal, obviously, but 20 goals from 26 scoring shots was more of a reflection of how easily the ball was coming in, and therefore the shots at goal were easier. So I think the backline held up okay overall. It was just a general point about how young this team is. I am unfazed and unsurprised Jeremy Cameron had 9 goals today when you consider either the quality of our backline or the inexperience of our backline. Again, don't really have any concerns about who we selected, just more acknowledging that it was always going to have a hard day today. When you consider as well Brady Hoff, who has now become an experienced, reliable defender, also left. Jeremy Cameron kicking 9 though was kind of predictable. I mean, it looks like they put Jinby on him. That probably was the best matchup, really. I was thinking Edwards might be a bit too tall and too aerial focused to be a good matchup for Jeremy, who likes to push up the ground. And Bazzo, that would have always been an enormous task for him. So Jinby made sense, but Jeremy Cameron did whatever he wanted today, and frankly, I'm not surprised. I put him in my fantasy team for that reason. So yeah, 100 points down at halftime, and I'm not going to lie, I wanted to gut the player. So I wanted to sack every single player and coach associated with West Coast and just start again. And I was doubtful of our ability to come out and make a response. When you consider as well, Geelong needed to make up some percentage. They needed to make up 7% on percentage, and I think they made up 6% in the first half alone. So I would have thought, that 100-point win, if they didn't push it all the way to 200, which was very much looking like it was on the cards, I thought they would push for a little bit more. So I'm not entirely convinced that they slacked off because of that, but I do think, it's probably likely that they did drop off because it's just a natural psychological thing you do when you're 100 points up. You don't go quite as hard, right? So there's no doubt that was a factor. And I was, doubtful of this team's resolve to be able to come out and make a real response in the second half. They did prove me kind of wrong. To what extent we should be happy about that? I mean, let's be specific. We scored 5 goals, 6. We had 11 scoring shots in the third term. That is something. Because, in the past, we probably wouldn't have even bothered to do that. So we outscored them in the third quarter and then managed to win the second half overall and, generate a lot of inside 50s. Again, this is probably due to the sting being taken completely out of the game. That's not so much what I'm going to take out of it. We did have a lot more uncontested ball. It felt like the Cats' pressure dropped off. However, that doesn't mean there's nothing we can take from it, because specifically there were some young, talented players, namely guys who have played like 10 or less games, that really stood up in the second half and in new roles. And I think that is actually worth taking from this game, in contrast to some of our other worst losses this year. Against Hawthorn, against Carlton, the ones that come to mind, I don't know if we got anything out of it. In this game, at least, we'll talk about Jack Hutchinson. When Jack Hutchinson was drafted, I thought he was a forward who could play a little bit of back and maybe on the wing, and that was how he was described by Dwayne Massey. We started putting him at the centre bounce almost randomly. Didn't see that coming. Ended up with 6 clearances, 24 possessions, and a goal. And 16 of those 24 possessions were contested. And it felt like it was very obvious his work rate. I think he had a moment where he dropped a simple mark, but he fought to get back to the ball, win it back, and handball it to a teammate. It felt like even little deft touches he was doing. I think he kind of set the standard for working hard today, and that is something that was advertised when we recruited him, his work rate. So that is something to think about. He's definitely given us something to think about going into this offseason. If he is actually a genuine midfielder who can win clearances. I mean, he won 6 clearances in the second half alone, I think. That is a pretty interesting development that I am absolutely going to cling to out of this game. I thought Harvey Johnston did well. I think he only had the 8 possessions, but little deft touches again. There was one possession he had, which was a really nice left-footed kick that hit someone inside 50. The siren blew right before the mark counted, so it didn't count, but something from that. Clay Hall was okay. And Tyrell Duo as well played a little bit on the wing, and I thought he had some nice moments too. And, really nice moments of class and skill. So those little things are little signs that we haven't had in previous losses that came in the second half of this game, which is enough for me to not be completely seething about it. Even though on the whole, I think this is an embarrassing result, we did at least have some growth from youth. I'm trying to look to see who else played well today. I mean, Campbell Chester played backline. I thought he had some moments without necessarily standing out. Ryan Marrick also had some moments of class. Jake Waterman fought hard. He actually had the most fantasy points of any Eagle with 2 goals and 16 possessions. Nearly 400 metres gained. I mean, sure. I think Harley played okay as well. I think if you look at his numbers, he's not playing much midfield time. particularly in that second half, you could just see like Duggan and Hutchinson in particular, a lot of new faces in there. So I suppose it's good that we're experimenting. It was good that we kicked 9 goals, 7 in the second half. I suppose that's something. Again, like I said, game dried up, so I'm not really trying to over-amplify some of the good signs we had, but there were at least some good signs in a weird game where half of it was us keeling over in the fetal position, hoping that it wasn't going to turn out like the Sydney game. To walk away with that with some signs of improvement is something, but I think on the whole, I think we're just ready for the off-season. I mean, I'm sure like next week, I'll be like, oh shit, there's no Eagles until March. But I think, judging the malaise this group has been under for a little while now, I think they're ready for a break. And, we just have to think about, obviously, trade and draft to come through. And I'm hopeful that with a big preseason, some of these younger guys can take the next step. There's a few guys we know about, Hewitt and Long coming back into the team. But what's Marriott going to be like after a second preseason? Johnston as well. I think he just turned 19. Tyrell Jewell as well. Could definitely use another preseason. I think there's some signs of optimism there, absolutely, albeit I am sick of this team getting ragdolled and becoming a meme, and thankfully it didn't turn out the way it looked at halftime of this game, but far out. It's hard to really anticipate when this team will improve. It feels so far away at the moment. I think, we've got, when you look at some of the youth on our team, all those guys I mentioned, the particularly young ones as well, I think we've got some late gems that people don't really know about, and they probably won't know until we click as a team. So when does that happen? Well, it feels so far away right now. I think that it's going to take a good coach to come in, whoever that may be. It may be Schofield, it may be Montgomery, it may be somebody else, to come in and be able to optimize a game plan for the strengths that we have. I feel like we've got some scattered talents around. How do we get them to play well against each other? How do we get this midfield to not get slapped most weeks? How do we get this team to be able to defend on transition better? How do we get more consistent tackling inside 50? That is not a question for right now. So to summarize this game, glad it's over. Glad it wasn't worse. Strangely got some optimism around some individuals I saw in this game. How proud am I of the fight back in the second half? Not very, but when you consider, to be fair, how much of it actually came off the back of young guys working hard, I think that probably is deserving of praise. Had it been our senior players lifting for half a game and mitigating this result, it wouldn't have felt so good. But I think there was a number of times we saw youngsters combine. Johnston to Dewar, to Hutchinson, to Marrick, to Harley Reid, who kicks a goal. Like that happened a couple of times in this game. Not specifically that, but there was something out of that. So there's still a lot to play out this year. So thank you for sticking fat with this channel. It's been an up and down year. I don't know if I've certainly enjoyed making content and being True Eagle, or establishing True Eagle, and being dedicated towards making content. I've enjoyed that process. I've enjoyed the support from you guys and having this community vibe with you. So it's been good. But the next thing I'll say is we've still got plenty to go. We got to figure out who our coach is. We got to deal with all the trade rumors, and then assess how the trade period went, and then talk about the draft, and then after that, there's not a lot, and then there's the preseason again. So I guess don't go anywhere, because this really is where we make our money back, the draft. Hopefully we don't stay in this loop of irrelevance for too long. As always, I'd love your input on the game, see some things that I didn't. Like I said, I got up at 4. I'm still tired. I haven't slept properly. I slept 4 hours last night, couldn't nap after the game. And live streaming as well means I probably missed some little things here and there. So let me know in the comments what you thought of the game. I can understand why you're pissed off. I was pissed off last week. I was pissed off at halftime. I've kind of chilled out now. So we've got a long way to go. We need to stick fat. Up the Eagles. I'll see you in the comments. Cheers.